Hello, thanks for tuning into my stream. I've been working on my project cards plugin, and I've made a bunch of changes that get it pretty close to really functional for I get at least my day-to-day use case. So um, it's not ready for beta yet or alpha yet, but there's a few things to do just to make this thing seamless. But let's have a look at what I've implemented. So let's check my notes here. So the first thing is we're sitting on a file. Remember, if I open up a new tab, I get that browser straight away. I'll close that though, and I'll actually just close this file, and you see a new tab opens automatically. That's part of Obsidian. I didn't do that, but I hijacked that and I put this card browser here. So now we see the test vault or the vault name at the top. None of this styling is final, but we got the test vault at the top. We've got folders at the top as well. They might move, but they're in a separate segment. And then you've got files down here. None of them are categorized, but you'll see this one has like a bit of a shadow, just like these other folders, because it's actually a folder in and of itself. It's just being treated as a file because my plugin has looked at what's in that folder and it said, this doesn't look like a categorization folder. It looks like a folder that's grouping one set of files for a project together. So if I go into that, you'll see there's one file and it's in a drafting state. And because there's one file and it's got a state, then it knows that this is a project. I might tweak all of this before it gets released, but if I go back and look at some more basic things, so if I go to quantum centrality and I click there, you'll see at the top we've got this new menu, set state. There's no state set. I'll go back and I can use my keyboard shortcuts or my mouse shortcuts to go back or forward, just like in Obsidian. It does that by default. You'll see quantum centrality is sitting in this section where there is no categorization, right? But if I click on it and I change it to, I'll say it's an idea. So there's an order to these states. There's idea, then it's drafting, and then it's final when you've finished it. I might change the name. The tense kind of isn't the same for these, which was intentional, but I'm not quite sure I want to stick with it. And then there's two others, archived and cancelled. So they sit a bit separate because they're not in the flow. So the idea is when you have an idea and you just jot it into Obsidian, it gets marked as an idea automatically, or it would. Then when you start properly working on it, it's a drafting state. And then once you've finished it, you mark it as final. And final means that it's completely done. In the context of me, they're blog articles. So it's completely done, but I haven't scheduled it or posted it yet. So when I schedule it or post it, then I archive it. It doesn't say posted because you may not have posted it yet. You may have scheduled it. So it says archived instead to be a bit more generic. And then if I decide, if I'm working on something and I decide to give it the flick, then it can be cancelled as well. This will all be customizable, but something like this will be the default that you get when you install. Obviously, some people might want to put review in there or something like that, but I like to keep things as simple as possible, and I don't have a review process that involves anyone else or anything. So anyway, so I'll mark this as idea, and you'll see it adds a property automatically called state idea. So I can close the properties because I can do it all from up here. I can change them, and it's changing that property. I can turn it off and set it back to no state, but I'll set it to idea. And so if I go back now, I'll see that now quantum centrality note sits within the idea section. and everything else sits within the uncategorized section. And these sections have particular orders. So if I go text and handwriting and I say, well, this has progressed beyond the idea stage to drafting, and I go back, you'll see drafting sits above idea because that's what you should focus on now. That's what you're currently drafting. Your ideas are going to be filled with heaps of ideas, and they can sit lower for when you want to access them. I'll go to unexplained truths and I'll mark it as final, and I'll go back. And so final sits right at the top. And then if I go to that and mark it as archived, I've posted it, and go back, archived sits down the bottom, but actually archived and cancelled will be invisible by default. So whether they sit down the bottom or up the top or whatever, I'm not 100% sure yet, but they will be invisible by default. If I go back into this perspective preference one, which is a folder, and I go into that, let's see. That's not working properly. That should be in drafting, but obviously the folders obviously haven't tweaked that properly yet, so it's not quite working. But the idea is that you can come in here and you can add more files in this folder as long as they don't have a state. As long as only one has a state, then it will be considered a project. But if multiple have states, then it considers it as a folder that's categorizing other projects. So then it puts it up with the folders. But that will also be probably, it might not work that exact way. It'll probably be tailorable so you can force something to be a folder or force something to be a project. Cool. I think that's it. Let me double check my notes before I leave. Yeah, so it's taking shape. I can definitely start using it myself, and it'll be really handy to bring front and center the things that I'm working on, and hide lower down everything else. One other thing that you will be able to do is, like, some of these folders aren't necessary day to day, and that's one of the main things I wanted to solve with this card browser. So I might have categories, but really most of this is like attachments. This ink is from my handwriting plugin. This is a test folder. Favorites is a different example, but most of them I don't want to see at all. So I will be able to right click and tell them to be invisible, and then you'll just focus on the things that you want to focus on. So that's it. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you play along in the future and keep abreast of the changes that are happening. Thanks.